What would you guys lose out on if you had not developed your friendship and your relationship over the 30
Oh
years?
my
That's a good
God.
question.
Great,
That's a really good.
great
You ask
question.
really good questions, Lord.
Virginians are confronting the truth about their ancestors, discovering their connections, and perhaps healing from a wounded past. Hear their stories about how slavery links us and what actions we must take to create a new narrative together. Join us for Linked.
100 million things.
There's just been a level of caring in our relationship, and who knows how and why that comes into a relationship between any two people. But,
Yeah.
Anne has been there for some of my toughest moments in my life, and I like to think that I've been there for some of her toughest moments. I think this has been an opportunity, if you want to think of it as an opportunity, to engage with somebody in a really deep kind of way over a long period of time.
I get a great deal out of knowing Pam, and it certainly expands my sense of the world.
I really just feel like your relationship is the epitome of what we can do as a country. And it's tied deeper than normal people. It's not just white and black talking about slavery, but you guys are
Right.
related. And there was an ownership and enslaved person relationship tied to that. And yet you were still able to cultivate a 30-year friendship from that. And so it's like proof that the fact that we can have these conversations and it is possible to gain something from them and it's worth it. And if you guys can do it, then someone who is a stranger, you have no ownership towards me, you have no relation to me, we can talk about it too. So I guess my last final question is just, what would you tell someone, like in 30 seconds, that was expressing their fear of having conversation?
Well, I'd probably tell them, try to just look at what you're afraid of and not project it onto the other person. And just take a risk. There's lots of good things in the world that you could try and do, and we don't do because we're afraid. Find a place where you have a common interest with somebody. That'd be probably a good place to start.
Black America been asking for that for over 400 years. Tell me why you treat me the way that you treat me. Tell me why that you don't consider me to be a man. Tell me why, right, that it's okay to take my life and sentencing me to a plethora of time that I cannot do. And then telling my mother, right, that this was the best place for me, captivity. Come on now, you know. They almost had me believing that I belonged in prison. There's a difference. There's a difference in believing that you belong and believing that you did an act. I did an act that got me into prison. But just because I did an act, I shouldn't have been re-socialized to believe that I belonged in captivity. Hell no, man.
I'd made a decision when I was teaching writing at the jail to open myself up and just defer as long as I could all judgment. Just not to think about, my role is not to judge what's right or wrong or what the reasons are for things. I just assumed that I didn't know the answer as best I could. I'm human, so I didn't always meet that goal. But when it came to things like racism in the system, or the root cause of drugs and addiction, or how trauma influences people in their lives, things that I didn't know have as much personal experience with, I just decided I need to learn this. And so I came to teach writing, but I realized along the way that I had a lot to learn. And so I decided to become Stan's student and Kelvin's student and all the rest of the men in the class, because I realized that they had a wisdom about life that was really precious and important.
So they asked me to recount the story briefly, and I did. And then the trainer said, "How did you feel in that moment when that family told you that you were not equal to them, that told you that you were black and they didn't want you to be seen with their daughter. And I said, well, it hurt. And she said, could you describe the hurt? And I started to talk, and then suddenly I choked up. And I'm facing this group of about 300 people, and I'm trying to get the words out. And then I started to cry and sob, and then I couldn't speak. And the trainer went on to explain to the group that this is what we do, that we push these things down and we put them in compartments, and we say it didn't hurt us. We say it didn't matter. Even now, speaking about it, I'm starting to choke up.
How would the country look differently if we truly addressed the negative impacts of slavery and racism, and the impacts that they have on society today?
I can get a little bit of that. On March 8th, 2015, Reggie and I were in a crowd of 70,000 people of all kinds. And we were all headed in the same direction. We had a common goal in the face of history. We were going across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And it just felt like one big collective mass of love. And I felt like I had a vision of what it would be like to have a just, a fair country that had dealt with its past and was dealing with its future. That was my visceral moment of having an idea of what this country could be like if we could put this all behind us.